Hey everyone, Coach Patrick here, Endurance Nation back with another member podcast. It's always fun to connect with the folks behind the scenes who, for some reason, follow my ridiculous guidance, but also are part of what makes Endurance Nation so special. From not just the community side, but also, sharing their experiences. And I think kind of growing alongside everyone else. Part of being a team is really special. And we have someone who just does it by sort of second nature. She's a leader, she's a doer for sure. And if it's got two wheels on it, she's probably already been on it for extended periods of time. I'm pleased to welcome Julia Gulia to the podcast today. Julia, how are you?
Hi, Coach P. I'm good. How about you?
I'm super, super well. We were joking before we started that this is the first time I've seen you inside a real room because your background
Yes.
is always epic. Always, always epic.
It's
So
always
you're
outside.
always outside. So you're just to give people some frame of reference, you're on the West Coast, right? So your background
Yeah.
usually has fog and
Yes.
beautiful venues. Yeah. What's your favorite
Yeah.
Zoom background picture?
Actually, my favorite Zoom background picture is the one I use for work, and it's one that I
Cool.
took with the Golden Gate Bridge in the background.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's these big, beautiful clouds, and it's a gorgeous day. But the reason why I love it is because the story of that day is those big, beautiful clouds hailed on me on my
Oh,
bike when I continued to ride that day. And it was a
mm,
whole thing, and there was hail, and I took video,
right,
and Thad had
right.
to come rescue me because I was so cold. But
Oh my
the
goodness.
video or the shot is beautiful.
Totally worth it. Totally worth it. I love those
So yeah.
pictures, right? Because those are
Yeah.
like the race pictures, right? Like something like, oh, this is a great picture of you, running in transition, And I look at that and I remember exactly what I was thinking, which was like, everybody get the hell out of my way. And like, what's that person doing
Yes.
laying down on the carpet taking pictures? Like, but it looks
Right.
like I'm so into my race. But my little
Right.
my
There's a
little
whole
corner.
story behind it. Yeah,
There's a whole story
exactly.
behind that stuff. No, I love those pictures, and I do remember
Yeah.
having been out to California to ride for a couple times, tour California camps and so on. That yeah, it's nothing happens on a small scale in California. So when there's clouds, it's pretty real. You better
Yeah.
watch out. Um,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, we're so pleased to have you here. I know the topic of our conversation today for listeners is talking about the challenge series. We have this Enverus challenge, which we extended from just one event last year into three this year. The idea being that, let me check for races. No, my calendar says no. It doesn't even say maybe, it just says no. No races in early 2021 as we get through this pandemic. And so proactively, with the help of some folks on the team, we created this little fun challenge series, which has three events. We have, sort of fun February, mini March, which I think some people want to call March Madness. Maybe I'll get sued by some lawyers or something. And then finally, Ultra May. It's kind of the next big picture. So it was meant to be sort of like little stepping stones to give people a chance to kind of get into it and do their challenges and move forward. So when we first scheduled, as you mentioned, we had only done February, but now it's taken so long. We've also done March. You still have to do May. There's no getting off the hook. I know you're kind of
Oh God.
about the May. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, all right. So,
One thing at a time. Yeah.
fair enough. So, let's talk a little bit about sort of the fun February stuff. So, when you signed up, you're like, oh, he's not going to do that ridiculous long challenge again. He's got something, that seems reasonable. So, what did you pick for
Right.
your fun February challenge?
So for my fun February challenge, I picked I went for originally the 12 hours across all disciplines for the week, but
Okay.
I ended up being able to do 12 hours of biking only, even though there was
Oh,
some running. So it was,
okay.
again, it was an extra accidental, woohoo, I bounced to level two.
Nice.
Because I like your tidbits in terms of having
Mm,
bite-sized pieces in order to be able to get through. And
hmm.
because I'm still in, I don't know if you want to call it delirium or denial, I do have gravel races that are on the books. So I'm
Okay.
within the ultra mountain bike training plan. So luckily
Hmm.
for me, in my potential delirium, this
Hmm.
is fitting in very nicely already with what
Yes.
I was doing. So
Hmm.
I had a long ride on whatever the weekday was, if it was Saturday, weekend was Saturday or Sunday,
Hmm.
and that took several hours. I think it was 4 or 5, and then
Okay.
my normal interval workouts throughout the week got me all the way to 12 hours just on the bike.
Oh, look at that. You said, yikes,
Yeah.
I just bumped up a level.
Right. Like, this is cool. So it worked
That's
out really well
awesome.
because I stuck with my training plan and it fit
Mhm.
just fine because you had a big chunk and then you
Mhm.
had little smaller chunks. And I think part of the way that goal was flexible was that it was time, not
Mhm.
necessarily intensity or things like that. So I
Mm.
was able to incorporate recovery rides to help me get there to our goal.
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. Right. So, for those of you wondering and maybe not knowing, each challenge has sort of 3 levels within it. So, to make it more accessible for sure. And as in Julia's case, right, you are able to kind of bump up a level, like bonus, yay. But it definitely, hopefully, takes some of that pressure off. Like one of the concerns that I have as a coach about challenges is that there's all these incredible things that people do to their body, but what they don't tell you when they're doing that challenge is sort of the cost of what they're doing, like either right now, like physically or financially or whatever, or the cost downstream. Like, sure, I survived that thing, but I'm a wreck now for the rest of the year. Um, but also all the stuff they've done beforehand. So when I see some of these challenges, I'm like, that sounds pretty cool, but that's going to break a lot of people. Like that's not worth it. So these challenges are meant to be much more accessible and achievable. So I'm super pleased to hear you're able to work it in. And I honestly, I loved how people have been flexible, adding different elements, into their training. We had someone this past weekend who was like hiking. Someone played ice hockey for 2 hours. I was like, I can't imagine riding
I
my bike for
saw.
4 hours. Yeah, and then do ice hockey for 2 hours. It's like, let's be like a dummy, but there's no way I'd be able to do that. So it has been pretty cool to see how people kind of build it in and sort of respond to the challenge. Okay, so you ended up getting 12 in that week. So, and then you had about a month before we got to
Mhm.
mini March. So did your calculus change?
Yeah.
Did you go this time? Did you say, I'm going level 2 this time because I was level 2 last time? Or did you approach it with the same open mind?
It was the same open mind, like, oh, hey,
Okay.
guess what? Because of my ultra mountain bike training plan, the
Delirium.
longer ride, yeah, the delirium, the longer ride in February was about 4 hours, which is just enough
Hmm.
to give me a good base for fun February.
Right.
Now, continuing on this plan in March, my longer ride was going to be, I think it was supposed to be 5 hours.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I'm going to go ride in this other beautiful area for my
Mhm.
gravel long ride.
Okay.
And it was beautiful, but it
Hmm.
tacked on about an hour 45, which put me over to instead
Ah,
of being 5 hours, it was 6 hours and 45 minutes.
aha.
So
I
that's
see.
how I was like, well, woohoo, here we go. And
Here we
so
go again.
yeah, but there were some really important learnings for me
Oh.
in that accident because number one, always bring extra food. Bring extra food, bring
Okay.
extra fuel, because with that extra almost 2 hours that I accidentally did,
Hmm.
by the time I was home, I had
Hmm.
enough food, but I was out.
Aha.
So, had I calculated exactly 5 hours worth of food, I would have been
Hmm.
hosed.
Oh.
So, always bring
Hmm.
extra. And I think for these longer activities, at least for me, I need to
Hmm.
start incorporating a bit of caffeine because I know it helps.
Mm. Okay.
So, and then you time that.
Hmm.
So, for me, like you have the caffeine early on, so it gives you that kick,
Hmm.
but it doesn't keep you awake until like midnight because I'm super
Ah, yeah.
caffeine sensitive.
Okay.
So it adds a level of thinking about your nutrition because that's everything. Because if you run out,
Mm.
and you're on empty and you're 30 miles from home, it's not a place
Yeah.
you want to be.
No.
So it was again, it was lucky, but I was like, yeah, I planned for 5 hours and I grabbed a couple extra gels. I had plenty
Hmm.
of fluids, thank goodness.
Hmm.
Um, but that type of thing it was thankfully not painful, right? But
Right.
it was one of the things where I realized, whew, I was accidentally lucky for
Hmm.
that.
Hmm. Totally. Well, so that brings up a great point. We were talking a little bit earlier about the physical side of the training and doing more volume. But another reason why I think these challenges are great is to sort out some of that stuff right there. I feel like even the most experienced athletes every year have to relearn a couple lessons. And absolutely one of them is about like long workout nutrition. Because you've been, in your pain cave or doing short stuff or whatever it is you've been up to, and you're like, meh, I don't really need food. And then you get outside on the bike and you're not thinking about it right away. You're worried about the bike, right? Like, does the bike look good? Are the tires, do they have air? Do I have CO2? Like, do I have my helmet? Totally. You start riding and you're like,
Yeah.
I have no phone, no money, and no food, and I'm like, God, I got to go back. And so having that extra nutrition is super, super critical for sure. And even if you don't have, especially if you know where you're going, you don't have that bailout route. But I think that's really important because if you run out of the nutrition, like if you had run out of the nutrition, could you have gotten the ride done? Totally. But the cost of that is massive, right? Like it ruins almost the next couple of days because your body's just like, oh. And then to compound things, if you have like a 7-hour ride, but you only have 5 hours of food, then those last 2 hours you're starving. So you get home and then you're starving, and then you're not going to be like, oh, that's totally, I'm going to stop for a second and make myself like my favorite, avocado toast with sea salt. And no, you're like, I'll eat whatever is stationary in front of me, right? And you eat all the bad stuff, right? That you're just like, oh, and that's a double whammy, I think, as well. Not to mention just the caffeine. So that's another reason why we did it, is capture those lessons learned. So I'm super pleased you brought that up. I think as a general rule, something I started thinking about a couple of years ago, like when I create something like an event, like we're planning on a ride later this year in June on Skyline Drive in Virginia, so double century. And when I plan a trip like that, where I've got logistics and buses and things like that, I always add it all up, and then I always add 10% more. Like whatever it is, it's $2,000, it's $2,200. It just always 10% more. And I just started doing that with my ride time. Like, and I'm like, oh, 40 miles?
Yeah.
That'll take me 2 hours. Exactly. I'll be back in exactly 2 hours, honey. Never. So now I'm always like 220. Right. And then like to your point, like, oh, do I need 4 gels? No, I'm going to take 6 gels. Like, what's the worst thing that happens? I just bring 2 back,
Right. Exactly. Oh,
totally.
Yeah.
And what I'll do often, just to makes life a little bit easier for me, sort of just random tip, because one of my friends did this and it's totally dorky, but he has like literally like, oh my God, what do you call those things that the tourists wear? The men, they got the little belt. Like
yes. Why am I blanking? A fanny pack. Is that what you're
like
saying?
Thank you. That's totally the word. Thank you.
Pack,
I'm like,
yes.
a handy hip thing. That's not a fanny pack. He had like a manly looking fanny pack, like black or whatever. So it kind of sat on that he could buckle around his shorts. And that just held all sorts of other stuff. And like, he never really went into that thing unless he needed it, but it just sat next to his bike and he put it on when he rode. And I was like, that is just genius, because you're not worried about all your pockets anymore. It's just a go-to. It's like your bat belt. You're always there.
It's all there. Yeah. Actually, Thad has exactly one of those, and he uses it because he's a mechanic. He's going to be able to fix everything. So he uses it, and he's got a whole bunch of cool tools back there, but it's designed for biking. So it's super flat. It just kind of sits right back here, and he can even tuck it underneath.
We need to see some pictures of that at some point. Is it in that closet back there? Go to the closet.
No, it's not. I know. No, it's not. I think he's got it on right now. He's out riding right now. So it's going to be hard to find. But he's got his CO2, and he's got all these fancy things, that he just rides with back here. And I confess, for me, for gravel riding, I've got basically an ultra running kind of backpack that I wear. So that way I have 1.5 liters of water in addition to the water on my bike. So there's some things that I don't worry about. I can carry extra tools. I can carry more food. I can carry sunscreen. Yeah. So for the gravel ride, it's that kind of extra storage. And it's for any longer ride, that extra storage is really valuable, because that's how you save yourself, right?
Well, the minute you start to get low on storage, that's when you start making decisions that can prove costly later, because then you're like, CO2 or like Kind Bar, and you're trying to like in the moment decide, right? And you're like, I choose the CO2, and like that's not really a place you want to be. The answer should be, take both of them. Like you just
Yeah.
find a space for them to be there. That's super. All right. Thank you very much for bringing that home. I think that's super important. So for you now, we talked about sort of this ultra adventure, etc., and these races that are coming up. So like what will be your longest ride, you think, in training? Like how long do you think the event's going to take you?
So my A race, although we're
Mhm.
not 100% timed, my A race should be
Mhm.
Iceland in July.
Oh, yes. The
And
Rift.
yes, the Rift.
Okay.
And I have the wonderful advantage of having done it last year.
Mhm.
So when I did it last year, it took me 11 hours.
Ah,
And
okay.
so I'm anticipating, like,
Mhm.
on one hand, I think, well, I'll be faster. But on the other, anytime I do something twice and I think, okay, well, I've done it, so
Mhm.
it'll be okay, that's not the way it goes. Um, I did Ironman Arizona twice, and I was like, all right, the second time I'm going to go faster. I know the course, da
Mhm.
da da da. And the second time it hailed and there was wind and it was crazy. So, it was at
Mhm.
least the same time as last time. So
Okay.
mentally, I'm saying, yeah, it's going to take me 11 hours again, period.
Mhm.
No
Okay.
matter if my skills are better or if I'm going faster. So that's the race. And
Okay.
then I want to think about how, what kind of ride is going to get me close, as close to preparing for that. Because 11
Mhm.
hours last year, I was like, whew, that was a little bit longer. So I think I want to try to
Yeah.
work up to something that's closer um,
Okay.
to mimicking the fatigue that my body has. Because
Mhm.
I've done 8 hours and I'm going to do 8 hours this weekend and it
Mhm.
will be good, but another three is not nothing.
Yeah.
So,
It's not the same either. Like
right.
for sure. I felt like
Yeah.
I just did the virtual Everest thing,
Yes.
and I challenged myself to go faster than I did last time. And I'm
Mhm.
indoors. There's so many variables that are just completely fixed, which makes life very easy. Um, and gives me the opportunity. Like I'm not dealing with the weather and all of that. But I will say that the cost of trying to go faster, people are like, "How you doing?" Like they were like, "How's your butt?" And I was like, "It's fine." I'm like, but the rest of me feels like it was thrown out of a moving vehicle. Like my
Right.
back, my shoulders, like
Yeah.
not even my lower back, just like the stuff that held me up.
The whole
Like my
right.
arms were tired. My daughter was like, "Play volleyball," and I was like, I couldn't even
You're like,
set
what are
the
these
ball.
floppy
Yeah,
things?
it's like bouncing off my face. She's like, "You're not very good at this today." And I think there's a cost. So part of that is you're right, doing some of those longer rides, I think, to really help. And also
Right.
as a breakdown way too. I think the difference between say like 8 and 10 or 8 and 11 is also,
Yeah.
you can be creative too, which is like, hey, I'm going to go 5 hours to a place. I'm gonna sit down and I'll grab a sandwich or coffee or whatever it is
Yeah.
at this place. Take half an hour, 45 minutes. Go to Solvang. I'm making this up. It's probably nowhere near you. Eat some yummy pastries, and then come back. Right. So you do your 10 hours, but
Yeah.
it's got a little bit of a break in the middle,
Yeah.
which makes it a little bit easier than just going that whole straight time. Um, it's
Exactly.
always a big win. You know.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So
Yeah.
it sounds like from your
Don't.
first ride description that some of your rides you do in fairly remote areas when you're riding on gravel.
Yes. Yeah, it
Okay.
is. It's technically it's not necessarily distance far.
Hmm.
It's more like so for instance, there's a
Hmm.
place above San Francisco called Stinson Beach. It
Okay.
is wildly popular on the weekends. There is a ton of people. Yet, if you go not even 5 miles away from Stinson Beach, you can access these trails that are gorgeous, but it's there's not cell phone reception, there's not that many people.
Mm,
So it is technically remote, but not distance remote, if that makes sense. So there
interesting.
are certain things like I take two phones and
Mm,
I do all that stuff, but it's not like I'm
mm,
50 miles away. It's more like I'm, you know, 5 or 10 miles away from a place where there's a lot of people. It's just there's not a
Mm,
lot between me and there. So hopefully
interesting.
that makes sense.
Oh, totally. No,
Yeah.
it totally
But it
does.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous to get away, and I don't have to go like hundreds of miles away to get that
Mm,
beauty
mm,
for the
hmm.
rides, which for me is very motivating and rewarding, because it's like if you're going to go out there all
Hmm.
day and possibly dig
Right.
yourself this little hole that you have to get out of, at least you can come
Right.
away with like, oh, it's gorgeous here.
Gorgeous. Yeah, totally. That's what, when I first, to tell you a little story, when I first got into triathlon, I've been running. I was in the Peace Corps, and
Mhm.
all I could do was run. There was no other infrastructure.
That's
Um,
all you do. Yeah.
and when I came back, I got a bike and started riding a bike. And I just remember being like, people were like, "What's your favorite sport?" And they thought I was going to say running because I've been running for a while.
Right.
And it was always cycling. So I was like, you can go places. I can run for an
Yes.
hour, and I don't really leave this town. But if I ride my
Right.
bike for an hour, I'm 4 towns over. Like, that's
Yeah.
just, to me, the part of what's awesome about it. Like, when I hear people sort of wax poetic about motorcycles, I know you also have two wheels with motors. Um,
Mhm.
the whole idea of like adventure on the open road and being able to go places and see stuff, like I love that stuff. Like, of just people will say, "Oh, it's kind of
Yeah.
crappy here all day," and I'm like, "Not for me, because I
Right.
got on my bike." Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Like that, I think there's, as I get older, perhaps, but I definitely appreciate more the adventure side. I think when
Yeah.
I first was training, it was like, "Oh, that's right, 90 minutes at zone 3 with a heart rate of X," and like that was it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
now I'm like, I wonder what it's like. Is that guy finally done building that deck? Like, I have no idea, right? Or is the bridge still out? Or
Right.
will I see the
Yeah.
rabbits again? Like, all
Right.
that stuff is super super fun, and I
Yeah.
do appreciate that. And also, um, on the adventure side of things, because we've had a bunch of people reading, out of thin air, sort of a
Oh,
sociologist look at running in Ethiopia, and part of the Run Channel is
okay.
our book club. And a lot of what he talks about with the Ethiopians running is how specific they are about choosing the places they want to run, um, as part of their progression. So they'll start off in like the super soft areas, and they'll eventually, to the last 2 weeks, they'll
Right.
hit the road, but they don't really run on the road. But the way that they run in those sort of crazy areas is very different, and very, they're looping around and going back, and letting people catch back up again, and doing whatever. And it was much more of a sort of fun, almost playful
Hmm.
experience of riding, and running. And so for me, it was like, I've definitely been doing that on my run side, and I'm like, there's great trails right here. It's probably only like a 5 square mile area, but you can run in there for hours if you run all the trails. And yeah, exactly. Like, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So I do appreciate the idea of having cool stuff close to you that otherwise people may not even know about. They've just always just driven by it or gone by
Yeah.
it. That's kind of neat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
how did you,
It's
out of curiosity, how did you get into did you start off like, what was your progression? Were you like, BMX bike to like road bike to gravel bike, or what was your, and this is
so
you on a bike also, just so you know, I'm
right. Yes.
not on a pogo stick. Sorry.
Stopping.
Not sure what that's about. You look a lot cooler on a bike than that.
I'm not sure about that actually.
Mm, mm.
But I would say my transition was multifactorial, if you will,
Oh, well,
because
right.
as you know, I've been I was doing Ironmans for quite some time, and I qualified for the Worlds in
Mm-hmm.
2018 in South Africa for the half,
Okay.
and that was quite an experience for a variety of reasons. But
Mm-hmm.
at that point in time, I wouldn't say that I was bored, but
Mm-hmm.
for me, it felt like that was kind of a cherry on top. Not that I, placed anywhere in worlds at all. I just did it to survive, keep my
Sure.
head above water. But the fact that
Literally.
I was able to go
Mm-hmm.
was like,
Yeah.
how does it really get better? And
Right.
you know, but part of it was also where I live now, and in Northern California,
Mm-hmm.
there, like we were talking just a minute ago, there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of beautiful riding when you
Mm-hmm.
get off the pavement. So
Okay.
one of my standard rides has a river crossing
Oh,
and these huge redwoods. I think I've posted, and it's just
yes.
gorgeous. So a
Mhm.
lot of my motivation is to just explore. It's something different. It's something away from cars on the road.
Mhm.
Because I had a bit of an unfortunate experience there as well. And
Mhm.
so the idea to just explore all this beauty around
Mhm.
was the motivating factor, really.
Mhm.
Because in Southern California, there's not many redwoods, where I'm from.
That's
But up
the thing.
here, there's tons of trails.
Mhm.
Um, and that's what got me to just start, oh, well, let's see. And then I have an
Mhm.
app. I use the Mountain Bike Project app to like find
Oh,
trails, here and there.
okay.
And then I can kind of like piece together a ride and stuff like that.
Mm.
So that's
Mm.
been very enabling to
Okay.
go explore and develop a new skill set.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely. I'm a huge fan of making stuff up. I can't remember what, like the routes. Like I love route planning.
Mhm.
People say, "What's your?" I had to do a YouTube video about it because people were like, "Where are you at?" But I'm trying to think of what the app is that I've used out here. Um, I use, all trails for just going hiking with the family. Like,
Okay.
what does that one look like? But there's another one that's
Is it Trail Forks? Maybe.
maybe Trail Forks. That sounds right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the second one.
Okay. Yep. Trail Forks. There it is. Trail Forks. Um, the two apps right there. If you just put trail in, it's like, hey, I've got two apps that say
Yeah,
trail.
exactly.
I need more apps that say trail on my phone, but that was a cool
Right.
one as well. And so I think to your point about the adventure side, it's super neat for me to sit down and be like, pull up a map, even when I for my Sunday runs here in town, and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to run from this area to that area to this one, and you start to, even if it's the same, to
Yeah.
your point, like the same space, how you put those pieces of the puzzle together just creates a different experience. And I do
Yeah.
appreciate that journey, especially for folks who are listening as well, about moving from triathlon and multi-sport to something different. You're not alone. Like there's people who, like, I think when you do it on an Ironman, you've invested a lot of time and money in it, and so you want to get better. So people generally do that, but after a while, people are sort of like, what do I get to do? Like I've built this habit, I've built this training, I'm a fit person. I love that. Like, and you just realize all of a sudden that you spent all of your time like swimming in a pool,
Yeah.
unless you're super fortunate, right? Like biking on a trainer, right? And then running. No knock on running, but just by definition, we can't run very far.
Right.
And when you start to look outside like that general sense and say, well, what if I rode my bike off road, or what if I ran off road, or what if I was swimming in open water? And you start looking at it, all of a sudden it takes the same place you were, but we're just looking at it at a totally different angle, and it's game changing, right? It's just because these are places you would never go there to be like, I'm going to ride my TT bike.
Right.
It just eliminates stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I love that, and I definitely am encouraging more people to take that leap. I do realize there's obviously financial issues related to that, but you can rent a bike and try it out.
Mhm.
Um, Go or pick adventurous places. I think it's so important. I think life's too short. Like I think from an athletic standpoint, we've only got so much time when we can like do stuff and have the flexibility to do stuff. And it's like, I don't know, like after some time you got to say, I've got to, get out there. I've got to do more.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, let's
So,
adjust. Let's play with it a little bit and see,
mhm,
see what else we can do. And I think it was a natural time to do
mhm,
that. I feel like fate was taking care of me a little
mhm,
bit, like, oh, hey, consider this, given all these other things that
mhm.
are that were going on. So
Totally. But you also had your double event hanging over your head. Like you went to South Africa and you survived the sharks. Like, do you really want to go back to South Africa and roll the dice on that? Like, I wouldn't have been it. No, no,
actually,
thank you.
we tried to go after the race. A
Yeah.
friend of mine came all the way to South Africa because that is where you can go shark diving. It's one of the best
Okay.
places in the world to see great white sharks. And we
Okay.
were so excited. We wanted to do this on purpose. We wanted to be with the sharks.
Mhm.
And we saved 3 days. We were able to go out on two. We didn't see a single shark.
What?
Not a single shark. We couldn't even get in the water. There were no sharks in
Oh,
this highly shark populated area of South Africa. So we
Oh my
tried.
God. They were so full of triathletes. They said, we're going to just take a couple of days off. We'll come back later.
Right.
So I do want to ask a question because you mentioned the extra phone stuff, and I'll be respectful of your time as well. But we talk about this adventure. And you kind of mentioned a little bit when you touched on the two phone piece. Like, so, you're adventuring, but you're a woman also, and you're off in the middle of nowhere. How do you strike a balance between embracing that epic spirit you have, but also saying like, I'm doing this in like a safe or in like a diligent way. Like I know a lot of our audience say like, that sounds cool. I tell my wife, I'm like, oh, I run on this trail. She's like, yeah, you'd never find me back here unless I was running from zombies. Like, I'm not going to go back in here. This is a terrible place to be, and I'm like, it's perfect. So how
Yes,
do you?
that's an excellent question, actually, because it is something that I've wrestled with for a variety of reasons. So like I mentioned, I do have the two phones, but I also have my Garmin. I use Live Track, and because that's connected to my phone, I use that because I do want to stay in touch. Like it'll send to, to my mom and Thad and stuff like that. And even though I don't, when you lose cell phone reception, you'll lose that tracking. But my little support system kind of knows where I ride and how I ride. So I actually do try to keep in touch. So like if I go out, like I'll either tell my mom or I'll make sure to tell Thad, like, this is kind of where I'm going. And then they'll see it on the tracking. And then like, if my mom loses me, she'll text me and be like, she's just checking in. And since it goes straight to my Garmin computer that's on the bike, like, oh, I can see when she's texted. And oftentimes like when I'm out, I'll be like, okay, I'm out. Can you see me? So that I try to be in constant contact, because before COVID, some of my most favorite places to go, I knew there was not going to be anybody there but me. And I was going to be 5 or 10 miles in with nobody around. And I used to be kind of like, but that terrain was really manageable. It wasn't too steep. It was rolling. So I wasn't too worried from a technical standpoint. But now, for better or for worse, because of COVID, there's actually a lot more people. So that deserted trail that I used to go to all the time, I can count on coming across ultra runners or other gravel riders any time. So I'm not ever truly alone. But for instance, because my mom will sit at home and she's like a great cheerleader and watch and see where I'm going. So she'll, she can know, like, all right, you're going to go off the grid and then maybe you'll come back on the grid. So it is something that I do pay attention to and want to be cognizant of. And that Live Track on my Garmin is something that I use all the time. And I take that time to just be like, all right, I'm here. All right, it's going to take me this long. So I do try to stay in touch, and having somebody, kind of on the outside, watching and helping is really nice. So I'm lucky to have that type of support.
Totally. I think, right. So some other folks, they'll do the epic stuff with a group or what have you. But I think what I like about what you're saying is it's impossible to eliminate all risk. Like, anything worth doing has some level of risk. So how do you mitigate it? What are the ways that work for you? So I really appreciate you sharing that out. I think it's something that we all struggle with. And even for the macho guys who are like, hey, wait a minute, like if I do this, note to self, I'll be, in a different space. Like I tell people, it's like skiing. Like if you're going to do this epic thing, it means that we don't go over there. We go over that fence and we go down the other side. Like are you that far away from the mountain patrol? No, they're right there, but they're not looking for you and they don't expect you to be there. And if you like, that's right. So I think people sort of understanding some element of that adventure side is important. And there are great resources. I did the same thing. I've got a bunch of keyboard shortcuts, right? So like SRSS, it turns into still riding, still safe. And I can do that, at a stoplight. I can be like, boop, 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 and send it to my wife. And I use, I think Wahoo. I've got a Wahoo, so it's got the same sort of live tracking feature as well, which makes a big difference. I've told people before, Road ID has an app that does breadcrumbs. And if you stop moving for like more than 10 minutes, it sends out an alert. There's lots of different options you can use. I do think, telling people generally where you're going is a great idea. Like super simple, takes 2 seconds, leave a Post-it note, whatever it is makes a big difference. But yeah, awesome. Well, I think, I'm so grateful that you shared this out. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, but for sure, you definitely are one of the folks on the team who's like super into the epic stuff, but also like you're still super relatable, which I appreciate. There's some folks who, take the epic to like such an there's that, I think we all have these visions of what it is, right? So they become like remote and like obscure people, like you've got a beard and like you're really sort of relatively inaccessible. And so pleased we got a chance to talk because you do the epic stuff, but you're also like a human. I don't know, and like
I'm an ordinary person.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, that's what I mean. Like that's my favorite part about the team is that folks like you are here doing it, and like you telling other people are like, hey, wait a minute, I can do it.
Yes.
I see to get
And
one
I
of those
don't have a
awesome
beard.
fanny packs.
Yes.
A fanny pack. That's totally going in the show notes, by the way. I might that down. Fanny pack.
Fanny pack. Yes. I'll try to get a
sure.
picture later.
Awesome. Yes. Well, speaking of pictures, I'll send you an email. But would love a picture, race picture or something like that, or something cool you'd like to share out that we could put in there, which would be great.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and I know, so speaking of the Ultramay challenge, so for those of you who are wondering, the difference between the other challenges and Ultramay is that it's at this still levels, it's 24, 36, or 48 hours. And the trick with Ultramay is it's not even as much work as you've done already. It's just that it's spaced out over time, which gets really difficult. Yes. The sleep deprivation, obviously also taking over your whole weekend, and your family's like, you're an idiot, which you can handle for like an hour, but like for 48 straight hours, maybe not so much. I took a beating last year. So finding your rhythm. And so I'm definitely open. If you've got a different proposal, I'm open to it. Don't worry about it. Maybe you get to post your like last 5 rides, and like we get to build the route for you that you'll do.
There we go.
Rides. So, like, pick Julia's Adventure or something like that would be super fun. Awesome. Very cool. Thank you so much, Julia.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get to share and hopefully inspire other people that there's more out there. There's more out there that's possible.
Yes,
Go
totally. Get out